Okay, up next we have another first-time ever performer at the FisherPoets gathering, which is awesome. It's going to be Philip Randall Patten. Let's give him a big round of applause for his first time ever. This guy's been sailing in Southeast. He's been chasing herring in Norton Sound and watching boats sink in Alaska or anywhere. In Alaska. He also knows a guy who knows me, who told him to come up and say hi to me, so he's got to be a pretty good guy. Let's welcome Philip, please.
Thank you. Well, the boat's sinking. There were two of them. One guy died. I'm only going to read about one of those stories. Also going to talk about when my brother survived washing overboard on a crabber in the Bering Sea at night in November. Here is the first one about a boat that sank. Things which don't float. A plank drifts off my beach. I live in a little beach cottage in West Seattle. A plank drifts just off my beach, has for a week, fishing boat white, striped with the marks of ribs, 20 feet long, bowed with the fair curve of hull, twisted from near vertical amidships to overhang of bow. For a while I imagined I would find it beached at low tide, would read a familiar name in the tops of letters near one end. I imagined an old friend had returned, drifted 900 miles south, as so much does return to my shores. I imagined strapping it to my truck, returning it to its skipper. I had bought him a table dance at Chillicum Charlie's to try to distract him the day after we watched her mast light slide under waves. But he had to leave, tears behind eyes. And here's the second part of that poem. There's times when reality catches up with fantasy, things which don't float too. Then science kicked in. When wood sinks to 60 fathoms, that's 360 feet, it becomes pressure treated, 160 pounds per square inch, driving salt water into every pore, driving salt through the grain of wood, slowly compressing what air is trapped within to less than 1/10 its surface volume, 1/10 its buoyancy, insufficient without help to ever float again. And here's the second one about the same sinking. Thank you. Hey, all right, that feels good. Okay, all things are at their most beautiful as they leap from the ocean or return, as in sinking, or 2 summers sailing in Southeast Alaska, or there is something about sadness which allows, well, you all know about that. As our bow wave follows the inside passage north, the curvature of the water doesn't quite keep pace with the curvature of the earth. So by Chatham Straits, we are several thousand feet of elevation up. You can tell this merely by stepping ashore, where at sea level the vegetation matches that of the Cascades after a long upward hike. Or without going ashore, where in July the mountains on Baranof Island leap snow-covered straight out of the dawn, the peaks with that silvery, glistening, clear whiteness from the chill sunrise at our backs. Normally our net is hauled through the power block overhead, squeezing a downpour of brown-red jellyfish tentacles onto the faces of the 3 of us who coil the corks, the leads, and the web. That was me that first season. I have some allergic reaction that makes me weak after for hours. But that morning, when our net hauls up, it drips with crystal clear, tiny chandelier, teardrop, jellyfish, refracting morning sun, it may be that we have hauled the snow-covered mountains of Baranof Islands straight from the deep. Another season, and outside Prince of Wales Island, the seiner stretches one end of its quarter-mile net seaward, while I pull the other close to shore and arc against current, the 7,000-pound skiff, the whining roar of its huge diesel as rollers of the Pacific lift it and me 12 feet cresting. Then we drop all the time, juggling the throttle so hawser-bearded bow almost touches vertical rock face amongst smashing waves. And when time for sorting, the young guys jump into the writhing, gasping salmon in the hold, heedless of fracturing ribs and spines, tearing flesh. With fall, we slide on the curve of the ocean to lower elevations, sinking toward more southerly latitudes, past Queen Charlotte Sound, down through the arrow straight gash of Grenville Channel, where the previous June and during my first week on a seiner headed north. Toward evening, the skipper says, the batteries are overcharging. The regulator isn't turning off the generator. He stops the engine. Because I am okay with a wrench, he has me remove the generator belt with a hacksaw. Hacksaws play in some of my poems. We run until the lights drain the batteries, and I put on a temporary belt with a link one can hook or unhook. A few cycles of that, but it means by midnight we drop well behind our buddy's boat, which means we don't see it swerve. One hand on the wheel. From time to time I press my face into the shield of the radar. Against its green glow, cliff-bound Grenville Channel is two vertical stripes of white, maybe half an inch apart. I watch a little whitish dot somewhere ahead, up near the left, westernmost stripe. I'm too green to know what I'm seeing. I tell our skipper, there's an odd little island or something on the edge of the channel a couple miles ahead. He says, there aren't any islands in Grenville Channel. I watch the dot detach itself from rock wall, and the cross sound radios, you'd better catch up with us. We are sinking. We catch up. She is lowering in the water. Her skipper is half into his dive gear. He hoped he'd have time to stuff a raincoat in a hole. No time. So now he's trying to slosh gasoline into a spanking new 2-inch Coast Guard pump, the crew scampering to release the skiff that can't be winched off the deck with the engine submerged. But it's too late for the skiff, for her. She rolls toward us as we pull alongside. Her crew step onto our boat, all except Crazy Sean, who jumps into the water to test his survival suit. What? We back off. In our lights, she is like the white of mountains and jellyfish the morning sun reveals upward into our net. Some things are never so beautiful as during loss. She rights herself and goes straight down. Well, yeah, it's great to come here because the reminiscences are, it's part of what old folks do. Okay, this is by my brother who survived getting washed overboard in the Bering Sea off of Crabber in November and watching the lights of his boat disappear over the horizon. Man Overboard by David Patten. I went overboard one dark afternoon in November in the Bering Sea. November afternoons up there so close to the Arctic Circle are dark even in the best of weather. Overcast made that day darker. It might as well have been night. I watched the lights of the crab boat disappear over the horizon. The crew had been out on deck getting the pots baited, untied, doors closed, and buoys and line coiled on top, when I noticed that someone, probably a guy who was only hired because he was the skipper's nephew, had left some coiled lines with a bit of tangle, a 25-fathom knot and some line in the wrong spot. A pot will be lost if the line is too short to run from the sea bottom to the surface. I bent over to untangle it. A mistake. An unusually large wave rolled the boat to starboard. I went overboard behind that pot, along with the last 3 pots, leaving only the other 2 crewmen on deck. The experienced crewman, they told me later, tore off to the skipper, who checked his course. A heavy boat can't stop or turn on a dime. I swam after the buoys, but they blew away too fast, so I turned around, treading water. I watched the lights of the boat sail off, continuing straight past huge waves and disappear. I kicked off my rubber boots and lost my rubber gloves. I tried to get free of my yellow raincoat, but couldn't. Later, I heard about a guy who did get out of his yellow raincoat a month or so before. The story was that his boat spotted the coat, but couldn't find him. I just tried to stay afloat. Without boots for the rest of the trip, I did wheel watch. The skipper had run straight until he could plot a course back. Eventually the boat approached me and I was in their spotlight. The water was lit up even when I was beneath wave crests. My clothes were dragging me under. Soon I was catching breaths only at the low points between the waves. I wouldn't be around for a second pass. I understood, and my brother, I understood they threw me large orange buoys we usually use as fenders. I didn't see them drift by. I didn't know they were doing anything. My half-frozen head may have invented a crewman's voice yelling, "Swim, Dave, swim." I did see him untie a 25-fathom coil of yellow line. The water was lit like a swimming pool at night by the deck lights, and there, a couple feet above me on the surface, was the line. I grabbed it. I caught a breath and drank more seawater. They pulled me up to the side, kind of like fishing for Davids. When the boat rail rocked toward the water, they pulled me up and over. My muscles were cramped, bunched in knots from the cold. For another half hour, I lay on the deck, gasping, just as a whole lot of other catch before me. Oh, man. Thanks. Okay, and up to Cape Danby, Norton Sound, that's the sound that has Nome on its upper side, and it has a little kind of uvula that hangs down called Cape Danby, and ice. The natives were all lining up and laughing at my brother David, out chopping at the ice floes surrounding his boat. The floes surrounded all the boats. David chopping at ice with a hatchet. Hell, even I thought it was funny. The chunks of ice blown in by a west wind, the smallest chunks around the boats, small enough to drift without grounding into the shallows where we anchored. And then, if you let the twin cameras hooked to your bicameral brain or here to your imagination pan outwards, to look beyond the beach with its 100 stranded fishermen, mostly natives. Beyond the small ice and the boats is a higher wall of bergs whose keels hang up on the shelf and thus can't make it into shallower waters. Huge ice, all wind compacted against this shore. A mile of impassable crags before open water, and my brother hitting at it with a hatchet. Go on. Okay. And one more very short one, and then I think we're out of time. Tow line blues, clunk, clunk. How much time do we have? Okay, we're down there. This is about 50 seconds. Tow line blues, clunk, clunk. I'm out in the swells under the skiff's propeller cage with a hacksaw. The problem is the water and I move up and down together with the waves, but the skiff has a different frequency, and that cage of girders around prop that are supposed to protect it and keep lines out of it, well, when a wave crest passes, it comes slamming down at me. I've solved that problem. I let the cage bang against my tank, clunk, 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 as I saw the tow line out of the wheel. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, another round of applause. That was just wonderful.
Okay, let's give Wayne another big round of applause for a great story out there. Thank you, Wayne. That was awesome.